Well, hello, and welcome back to She Renovates podcast. I have felt that the podcast has needed a bit of love, and so this is the first episode in a new format. So basically, once a month, I want to do a session that is a little bit more technical, goes into some of the technical aspects of renovating. And I've invited Stephen along for that purpose. Stephen's my brains trust in all things construction, and having been in the industry for over 40 years, I think he's a valuable asset.
You're listening to the She Renovates podcast. You're listening to She Renovates, the podcast for women who want to renovate to create an income and a life they love.
And so today we're going to talk about shop drawings. Now, shop drawings are a really important part of having anything custom made. And while we do try to avoid it, we can't always be successful with that. And so basically you need a process to make sure that you get what you ask for, that it doesn't get lost in translation. And we have recently had an experience in our own reno with a contractor who didn't do shop drawings, and it really demonstrated why that's a bad idea. So welcome, Stephen.
Thanks. Yeah, so look, we got a quotation for a set of aluminium doors and window up at the rooftop at a bedroom, and we had been without a door there for many months, so we were very pleased that we had actually got that order in, and it was eventually on its way. So just before Christmas, we had got the quote. I had requested at the time what the details were, provided them with a set of drawings and a brief specification. Nothing overly detailed, because it was, in some ways, it was a fairly simple window and door, or window, two separate items, but when I said got the quote, I asked that they do a shop drawing, and they said, look, on small works like this, we wouldn't normally do a shop drawing. And so that's okay. I guess that's up to them at the end of the day. And I did agree in a way that it was a small item. It was one door and a piece of window over the top of a garage. No problem. So anyway, just before Christmas, the windows arrived on site, or the door and window all arrived on site with the glass and the frame. And they, partway through the installation of the window upstairs, they came to me and said, look, the glass is too short. Now, this is toughened glass, so it can't be recut, can't be changed to anything else. He said, so what we're going to do, what he requested, he said, would you mind if we just put a trimmer to the top and bottom? To which I said, absolutely not. This is a brand new door. I didn't want it to look like it's something that had been botched together somewhere in an agricultural way. So I said, no, you've got to fix it properly. He said, look, that we can do that. We just put a larger top and bottom rail on the door, which was fine. I was quite okay with that, but it meant that it couldn't be finished, and they'd have to come back in the new year and install it, which they have now done. In the process, we noticed that the other piece of glass, which was a reeded glass for the over the garage roller door, panel door, was reeded, but it was reeded in a horizontal direction, not in a vertical direction, which was quite clearly shown on the drawings and documentation we provided. He said it wasn't clear on the drawings, and he hadn't seen that drawing and a whole lot of other things, which wasn't true. But anyway, so we were quite adamant that would have to be remade as well. So anyway, they came back after Christmas. They installed the door. That was fine. The actual aluminium door was okay. And then they fitted the glass. That was okay as well. And this particular door had a little dog door in it, a little flap door, and it wouldn't fit. And one of the things he had said before he started, he had to have the physical door in order that they would make sure that correct information went through to their glazier. It wasn't even close, and I don't think he even sent it to his glazier. So the long and the short of it, out of this exercise, this has actually cost that aluminium worker a lot of money. The glass was wrong, the door was wrong. He basically would have had to have remade both pieces of glass, and it was out of a sort of a $4,000 or $5,000 job. It was probably $2,500 of it was just in the glass. So it was a huge error on his mistake, on his side, And a lot of that, if not all of it, could have been addressed with a simple set of drawings and shop drawings. So the importance of it for him and for us would have saved us a lot of pain and agony over the whole thing if we had the shop drawings, which I had originally requested, but he thought was not worthwhile. So I guess that's just a lesson learned.
So I guess where this comes into play with our projects is whenever we're having something custom made, making sure that it's done right the first time. And the difference between shop drawings and design drawings, so design drawings, they're around, do you want to explain that, because you do it better than I do?
Yeah, so look, with design drawings, whether they're architectural or whether they're structural, they give the intent of the design. They show what it is that's trying to be achieved, whether that's an architectural feature, style or design, or whether it's a structural element which would nominate the overall intent of it. What they don't necessarily get down to is the level of detail that is required to physically build it, or how it's fabricated in their shop. That fabrication information is actually done by the shop drawings, and that's how it's covered off and closed off. So it's not that one is right or wrong, it's just that the level of detail is not on an architectural or a structural drawing. It's up to the contractor to provide that information. So you may have often heard the saying that the devil is in the detail, and that is very true. It's really important that detail is transferred into something which can be fabricated and can be made.
So what's an example of where we have had something custom made recently and shop drawings were produced?
Look, probably the most common one that everyone would be familiar with, of course, is joinery. So kitchen joinery is an essential item that has to be shop drawn. It has to be shop drawn for two reasons. One, you'll find that most of them these days are all made in CNC cutters, and therefore you'll find that you can't even program the machinery unless they have a CAD file, which has been obviously all shop drawn and detailed out in order for them to do the work. But that probably for most people, that would be the sort of thing that would be done. You will find other specialist items as well, sometimes handrails and balustrades and things like that, which are fabricated, and metalwork items and things like that, which can also be done.
We also had them on the lift.
Lift in particular, the lift is another one. That is there's multiple parts to a lift. There's a structural component, there's the interior fit out within the car itself, so there's shop drawings for all of the panelling, the ceilings, the lighting layouts, the control panel. All of those are all shop drawn, all detailed up. Most lifts have a different number of floors that they're covering, so they've got a different number of buttons, so everything is different, and so basically it's a bespoke item, and I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. Anything that is a one-off, so where you're not buying an IKEA off-the-shelf joinery or kitchen, then they need to be shop drawn. And that also avoids a lot of there is nothing wrong with IKEA, I'm not saying there is, but you will often end up with, if your room doesn't fit the size of IKEA, you will end up with what's called as make-up pieces, and you have these little infills or large infills where you're making up the difference between what is an off-the-shelf item, if the module is a 600 module and your room is an odd size, a 2500 long wall, obviously there's going to be made up somewhere, and it can only be done with a filler panel. Whereas if it's joinery that's made in a specific joinery shop, they will be individually measured and then they will be made up to the exact size. So that's where it becomes bespoke.
That's a really good point, because I think, to be honest with you, I think the main application for profitable renovators is their joinery. Doors and windows, they're probably the three main applications for requiring shop drawings. But I have had joinery shop drawings from a custom joiner that had infill pieces in it. And so you wouldn't know that unless you had the shop drawing. So I've gone back to them and said, no, the reason we're having a custom kitchen is so we don't have infill pieces. Yes, so very interesting. Yeah, so determining the difference between design drawings. I guess the other thing I wanted to say is a lot of our projects we actually do straight from the concept drawing. And yeah, so in order to get that level of detail, but even if you do have architectural drawings, a shop drawing has a lot more detail. Is that the
Yeah,
difference?
no, that's right. Often, if you do go to some of the joinery companies, particularly some of the large ones, they do have their own drafting team in there regardless. And they will actually even draw up the design of the kitchen. And it's just also making sure there are no clashes, that there's not something that physically doesn't work, or a corner cupboard that can't open properly, and all those sorts of things. They all get ironed out in that process. But that you are right, we generally just use a concept drawing. So we are reliant upon the shop drawing to give us that level of detail that we need. And for also, this is where you're really relying also on the experience of a detailed joiner, or a joiner who knows what products do and don't work, and how that they can then use that to there are some things which just the detail won't work, and that they can actually explain that, and it will show on a drawing quite quickly if something's going to clash.
Yeah.
And so we've had people say, look, it won't look quite right if you do this and this, and you've got to remember that if you've got an integrated dishwasher, it's going to be size X, you can't change it, and it'll change the modular arrangement of the whole joinery and things like that. So it's a case of trying to get uniformity in your design, but also make sure that you're covering the basics, particularly where you've got integrated items like fridges and dishwashers and things like that.
So just talking about the elements on a shop drawing as opposed to a design drawing, it will have quite specific details on how the thing's to be built. Would that be correct?
Yes, yeah, that's right. What they're doing is they're just providing the detail that they need in order for them to fabricate it, and it's also working with the materials that you've selected. Is the stone? Is it what's the stone made of, and all those sorts of things. And then similarly, again with the joinery panels, are a specific thickness in certain applications, and that has to be followed as well. So it's all of those things go into make the detail which is required. Again, this is where sometimes you want something of a particular size, but it may not fit because of the thickness of materials and everything else that they are using, but they have to work within those parameters, and that's why they bring out that level of detail in their drawings.
Yeah, and I think you're looking for like mechanical issues such as clashing, but you're also looking for aesthetic issues. On our most recent Potts Point project, so we had a concept that David had drawn it. It had arched overheads. And when the drawings came back, the shop drawings came back, those arches were all different sizes because there was a cabinet that was over the oven, and that was one size, and then there were smaller ones, and it just looked completely wrong. So if we hadn't have had those, we wouldn't have picked up that problem. So then we went back to them and said, they can't be different sizes. They must be the same size to have that uniformity. And so then they came back with like really small, all 300 cupboards. So these really small, tall arches, which once again wasn't the look we wanted. We had to do a bit of toing and froing to actually get it right. And I guess that sort of leads us into our next point, is that working with shop drawings is a collaboration process. That's when you start working with the manufacturer to make sure that their product is going to fit your brief and there's no disasters, because if it gets constructed and it comes to site and it's not right, then there is an issue, like who's going to pay for it. You've got a time issue, a whole lot of problems arise. So really, I guess, important step in the process. So in terms of that collaboration, what sort of things are we looking for in that sort of review period?
When the shop drawings are first produced, what they will do, they will be sent to you for your effectively approval on those drawings. So this is your opportunity to check that everything in those documents is correct, or as you had intended. And if you are using an architect or using someone else who may have some involvement in, that's an opportunity for them to have a look at it as well. In the case of anything that's structural, an engineer would actually go back and he would also review it to make sure the intent of the document has been transferred into the final shop drawings. And this is where you would be looking for the materials, that they are correctly specified and drawn, that you have got the dimensions are correct. They would have already had to have done a site measure to make sure that the space that it's fitting into is correct, and they would do that for their own protection as well. And then if there's anything which you think is just incorrect or the like, this is your opportunity to either ask a question, and again, if there's anything you're unsure of, just ask a question. And then go back and actually get them to clarify something. It's better to ask a question before than have it arrive on site and say, gee, that wasn't what I thought I was going to get. So I think really that's the key parts. There's some processes you need to go through, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But
yeah. I think just referring back to the Potts Point project again, some of the things that I was able to pick up was one that they not used. So we used two materials. One is the Polytech wood grain. The other one is polyurethane. So wardrobes in the bedroom were specified in the wrong material. So I was able to pick that up. Another thing, so obviously the overhead doors. Another thing that I noticed was that we had an oval island bench that was going to be tiled, or part of it was going to be tiled, and the side of the bench had to be recessed to actually accommodate the thickness of the tile. So that's something that I could see on the shop drawings hadn't happened. And basically what would have happened, if it wouldn't have been the end of the world, but just those little details make a difference, when it was tiled, the tiles would have been proud of the actual drawers, which wouldn't have been a good look. Really helps to refine your design. So I guess in how can we ensure that we get accurate and useful shop drawings, I guess it's around the review process and how we manage that. Things like, so how do you convey to the person doing the drawings that something's not right?
Yeah. Look, I think the best and simplest way is to actually, if you don't have the software, and a lot of us wouldn't have it in any case to do this, is to just physically hand mark them up. If you just write notes or draw something over it or mark up what you think, or even send a separate sheet if you need to, just explaining that the arches were not the right size. I think you actually just overdrew that onto the page and then made comments about it, and just send them all back in writing. So there is a record of what's been done. The recording of this is really important to make sure that you've got a record of what you've sent to them. And the other thing is to make sure that everything you have got on that is corrected and comes back as a new drawing or as a revised drawing with a revision number and a date on it. And the reason being, it's very easy to be working off a wrong drawing when there's been multiple changes and you just cannot remember it's a case of spot the difference, and it's just unacceptable. You have to have a revised drawing, and when you sign off on the drawing at the end of the day, you need to make sure that is the latest drawing and everything that you have said is on that drawing. Now, if something can't be done, and there's a reason why it can't be done, that needs to be agreed with you as well, not just ignored or glossed over. It needs to be corrected. Yes, so it's important that there's a clear documented history of how the document's been developed.
And that the final document is actually signed off.
Correct.
Usually the contractor would make sure that happens. A question that you might be wondering is, do you pay for the shop drawings? So are you asked to pay for them?
It would normally be included in the price, and the example I gave earlier, that was interesting because I did ask for shop drawings and he said, we don't do them on small projects, which was fine, but in the end it came back and bit him, unfortunately. It would have been a lot cheaper for him to do a shop drawing. Shop drawings do cost money, don't get me wrong. It does take time, and particularly with a lot of structural steel work, there's a lot of work in shop drawings, and sometimes they even have it as a line item in their quote, what the shop drawings are. But they're not suggesting that you don't have to do it. It's just to give you an idea that there is a cost associated with developing up that or detailing that level of design. And yes, there is a cost, but without being rude, it's just the cost of doing business. It's just what you need to do as part of a process.
And from their point of view, particularly most joiners have the automated machinery. They can't actually use it unless they do them.
That's correct.
But generally when we're ordering a kitchen, they won't do shop drawings until you've paid the deposit, which is fair enough because there's an expense in it. But once you've paid the deposit, so often I'll have that conversation up front, when will I see the shop drawings? And it's a good idea to be aware that review process does take a few days. There's a bit of toing and froing before you get to a point where you can go into production. So I guess where we're finding it useful at the moment is we have, I guess, having our first foray into ordering materials from China. So we're having some steel and reeded glass doors manufactured. And so I sent my hand-drawn diagram of what I wanted, and they came back in a CAD drawing. And so we've been able to have some confidence in that. We do feel like it's a bit of a brave move, but have some confidence in the production because of their process, their shop drawing process. And it has been useful picking up issues. So some of my concerns were because I was wanting, there's a sort of a decorative element arch to the steel. I was wanting that not to be too heavy. So I'm able to see how heavy it actually is. But it also picked up a problem that we realised that the frame for the door was 2.4 metres wide. So it was the width of the whole opening, which we know we can't get up the stairwell. So we're able to pick that up and get them to adjust the process so that it can be assembled in parts on site. And I think the third thing that came out of that was, so we've got basically arches, 4 leaves, and the arches open back on themselves. So they, they're perfectly mirrored.
Yeah.
And so we're able to ensure that is how it translated on the design through the shop drawings. So they're great value, and they give you a lot of confidence in that piece of work. So I just want to go through our takeaways from this episode. Do you want to take turns in this?
Yep.
So I guess the first one is, if you're having something quite detailed, custom made, such as windows, doors, balustrades, a lift, a kitchen, or any joinery, and your contractor does not do shop drawings, just realise that brings an element of risk into the process. And so I would be really, particularly with joinery, you really do need to have them to be able to make sure that your plan is materialises as you envisage.
Yeah. So basically, it's for anything that's bespoke. So
Yeah.
it's something that's not off the shelf, basically.
Yeah. So what's the second point?
Yeah. So I think, to just recap on that whole review process, the whole purpose of the drawings is to give one another a clear understanding of how it's been interpreted by the contractor or whoever it is that has developed that drawing or shop drawings, and your opportunity to go through and check that it is correct to your understanding. And this is both looking at the materials, the composition of what's been made, the architectural intent or structural intent, and making sure that the dimensions are correct. Not that it's your job to actually measure it, but nonetheless you need to make sure that it has been site measured and they've done all the things that are necessary in order to give you a good quality set of shop drawings, which you will know will fit at the end of the day and it will all work.
Yeah.
So,
And the third point is just to manage the documentation of the changes. Make sure that the updated drawings are, what's the word?
they should have a revision on
That's
each
it.
drawing that comes out, whether it's done in a numerical or alphabetical way. The first one might be revision A or something like that, or revision 1, and then every time that there's a change, that should be documented, so you're not trying to second guess whether they have incorporated the things you've asked them to do.
Yeah. And then that the final one is actually signed off before they go into production. And yes, so we would encourage you to embrace shop drawings as another tool in your toolkit for delivering your quality renovations on a budget. And we'd also love to hear about your stories with shop drawings. If you've had any positive or negative experiences, we'd love to hear from you. And that's it for today.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
This is the She Renovates podcast. To discover how to harness the power of renovating, check out theschoolofrenovating.com.